welcome back. This is the first video of the new year 2024, and it's going to be something a little different than you've seen before. I'm adding another strand, I guess you would call it, to our video collection. And what we're going to be introducing today are the Civil War stories, and I had a bunch of them collected. We will continue with the other strands in our videos with the adventures with the newspapers and the programs that we're putting on every month. By the way, we missed the first one because we were frozen out, so we didn't get any video on that on the January program. The sources of the stories are two books that I compiled early. Retired in 2003 and started doing genealogy, family genealogy. And one of the sources I was using was the Lincoln Herald, the microfilm at the Lincoln Library, Lincoln Public Library. And I was finding a lot of articles about what was happening in Logan County and letters from the soldiers. And so I started collecting all those and transcribing them, and I came up with the book called the Logan County, Illinois during the Civil War as reported in the Lincoln Herald. So these are all articles from the Lincoln Herald. We have 267 pages of them. Unfortunately, this is no longer in print. It was printed in 2006, and we sold them all. So we have none left. So if you ever get a chance to grab hold of one, get it while you have an opportunity. So there's 100 of them out there somewhere. There are many topics in there. There's not just the letters from the soldiers or articles about the actions that the soldiers were involved in, but there was a lot of stuff going on in the county. One of them would be the Sanitary Commission. It sounds like somebody's taking care of sewers, but the Sanitary Commission back then was a predecessor of what the Red Cross did in World War I and World War II. It provided clean garments and bandages and things for military hospitals so that the soldiers could rest comfortably. And they didn't. Now, some of the soldiers that went off to the war became pretty good correspondents. They were pretty good storytellers. They were good writers. A couple of them were newspapermen before they went in, and they knew how to write the stories that you'll be that I'll read to you. The second book that goes along with this is the companion book to it. And this book I put together, and it was printed in 2009. And if you'll remember that the statue you see here on the cover fell down in a storm, or was knocked down in a storm in 2008 in December, very late in the year. And the following year, a committee was formed to replace the statue. So I served on that committee, and we had that installed in 2011. So it took us 2.5 years from the time it fell. But in here I have the information on the 444 Logan County men who died during the war. So their cause of death, when they died, as much as I could, where they're buried, and information like that is in here. And then I use that, their service records and that information do a little statistical work, and I'll explain that as we go along. Now, on the back of that same book, this is it. We have two photographs. The top photograph is of the the 7th Illinois Infantry Volunteers. Now, a regiment is made up of 10 companies, and the companies can be up to 100 men in each one. Two of those companies came from Logan County, one out of Atlanta and one out of Lincoln. And they were organized in April of 1861, so it was right after the call for soldiers from President Lincoln that this regiment was formed. So this is the first regiment after the war was declared. So there's 6 other regiments you don't know about, and they were put together in the Mexican War. They served then. So they started numbering from number 7. Okay, we have the second picture there is the regimental flag for the 38th Illinois Infantry Volunteers. And I don't know if you can see that very well, but each line has a different battle name. And I'll get you a closer picture of that and post it on the video. And then you'll be able to read what battles they were involved in. But they were the second most active regiment and had the second highest losses. Were 7th Infantry, and I'm talking battle losses now, 7th Infantry and the 38th Infantry. And we'll get to the 106th later on. So you can, and they had the most losses for one regiment out of Logan County. Okay, so the companies, that said a group of 100 men, were formed in the towns like Lincoln or Atlanta, and one person would get it started. They'd have all the paperwork done for these companies, and they would get everybody, to sign up, to enlist, and they would come together once they had the company together, and they would elect the officers. It wasn't done by merit. It was more of a popularity thing, and that's the way they started. Usually those people who were respected throughout their service. So the voting really was not too far off what would actually have happened if it was done on merit. Once the companies were formed, they moved to Camp Yates. They had to apply to the hierarchy at Camp Yates in Springfield to start their training, get their equipment and information. So they had to move to Camp Yates, where they started their training, got their uniforms, their arms, other equipment that they needed. And then they were moved to another camp, a bigger camp where more intensive training took place. In this case, for the 7th Illinois, it was Camp Du Bois. And then once training was done, they would take 10 of these companies and put them together and make a regiment. And that's how the 7th was formed. And then all the Logan County soldiers that served throughout the war were all volunteers. There were no use of the draft in Logan County, and the draft was used across the country. But the 7th loss had a day where they lost more men than any other regiment with with Logan County men in it, and we'll get to that later. This first enlistment in April of 1861 was for 90 days. But at the end of the 90 days, these guys could go home, they could re-enlist in the 7th, or they could enlist in another regiment. And many of them did that. Many of them figured out where their friends were or other people in their town, and they wanted to be closer to them, so they would switch to a different regiment. And I've got several documentations on that. The soldiers that went, and I think I told you that some of them were acted as correspondents from their respective regiments or companies, and they would write letters back to the paper, and that's what I collected, and they would keep people up to date on what was going on. The first of these guys was with the 7th Regiment, and he was from Company H, Lincoln, Illinois, and his name was Philo Conkling. And we're going to look at one of his letters today and another piece of information that he sent home. Illinois men, Iowa men, Indiana were in what was called the Western Theater. Western part of the United States was us, Mississippi River. There were some states beyond the Mississippi, but not very many. And the idea of the Western Theater became to get control of the Mississippi River so that we could cut the supply lines for the South in half and stop the flow of material from the west, the farther west. And then we would have control of the Mississippi River. We could move material up and down the river at our leisure, so that we could supply the soldiers that were starting to work their way to the east from the Mississippi River. And we know that took a couple of years to get there. So we're going to start with Conkling's letter, and this letter talks about getting from Camp Yates to Camp Du Bois, and their routine once they got to Camp Du Bois. And this letter was printed in the Herald on the 9th of May, 1861, and it says, "From Alton, from our correspondent. This letter was written for last week's paper, but failed to reach us in time. Editors." So, Camp Du Bois, Alton, April 30th, 1861. Mr. Editor, presuming that a few lines from here would be interesting to those who have friends and acquaintances stationed here, I devote a few leisure moments to give you an idea of how we are progressing. We left Springfield last Saturday at 10 a.m. We received our arms there, much to our satisfaction, as we had been anxiously waiting for them. It seemed as though the whole city had turned out to witness our departure, notwithstanding the drizzling rain. All wished us Godspeed, and by the 1,000 acts of kindness testified their deep interest in our comfort and happiness. We were delayed a short time at the depot, but at last the train moved along amid the cheers of thousands. From Springfield to Alton, it seemed as though the whole country had turned out to get a sight of us and cheer us onward. At every station there were hundreds collected, and their hearty cheers served not a little to encourage us to greater exertions, to do even more than is expected of us. At every farmhouse on our road, the fluttering of a handkerchief betokened a woman's parting salute, which you may be assured was promptly answered. Upon our arrival at Alton, we were immediately conducted and quartered in the old penitentiary. We had rather a hard time the first night, But now we are all settled, have good quarters, and enjoy ourselves as well as could be expected. We are fortunate enough to have 2 or 3 good fiddlers in our company. A contribution of a dime apiece bought a fiddle. And if you want to enjoy a ball without ladies, come down into the quarters of Company E any night, and you shall be furnished with complimentary ticket. There are 10 companies quartered here as follows. So he identifies the captains of each of the companies. Company A, Captain Joslin of Elgin. Company B, Captain Monroe of Mattoon. Company C, Captain Collier of Aurora. Company D, Captain Muno of Litchfield. Company E, Captain Estabrook of Atlanta. Company F, Captain Cumming of Bunker Hill. Company G, Captain Sands of Springfield. And Company H, Captain Holden of Lincoln. Company I, Captain Badcock of Springfield, and Company K of Captain Rowett of Carlinville. Colonel Cook was the commanding officer for the 7th Infantry. Our duties are as follows. Reveille is at 5 o'clock a.m. Company drill from 5:30 to 6:30. Breakfast at 7. Sergeant's call for reports at 8. Guard mounting at 9. Company drill on manual from 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. Dinner at 12. Battalion drill by division from 2 to 4 o'clock p.m. Dress parade and roll call at 5, supper at 7. Roll call at 8:30, tattoo at 9, everybody's to be in their quarters, and taps at 9:30 with lights out. So you see, we have very little spare time. The boys are in good spirits and anxious to be called into active service. Truly yours, Philo H. Conkling. So we're getting getting a feel of what the soldiers were going through. The pay list. Philo also sent this back so that we know what each rank was getting paid. The pay per month of artillery and infantry and of dragoons and riflemen when serving on foot is as follows. Sergeant Major, Quartermaster Sergeant, Principal Musician, and Chief Bugler are $21 a month. First Sergeant of a company, $30 a month. Ordnance Sergeants, $22 a month. Hospital Stewards, $22 a month. All other sergeants, $17 a month. Corporals, $13 a month. Buglers, $12 a month. Musicians, $12 a month. Farriers and blacksmiths, $15 a month. Artificers, $15 a month. And privates, $11 a month. In addition to the pay as above stated, 1 ration per day, an abundant supply of good clothing is allowed to every soldier. Quarters, fuel, medical attendants are always provided by the government without deduction from the soldier's pay. If a soldier should become disabled in the line of duty, the law provides for him a pension, or he may, if he prefer it, obtain admission to the military asylum, which will afford him a comfortable home so long as he may wish to receive its benefits. And I have one other article from that same issue of the Herald, and it's a visit to Camp Du Bois by, I'm assuming, as Henry Sturgis, who was then the editor of the Herald, and would within a year be in the Army himself. Camp Du Bois. We took a trip down to Alton the other day on the purpose to visit an old friend there and see our soldiers in Camp Du Bois. We found the boys all well and hearty, and to all appearances enjoying themselves to a high degree. Captain Holden and Lieutenant Myers were the officers of the day. The campground, as nearly as all our readers know, is the old penitentiary enclosure. The accommodations are much better than those at Camp Yates, as they have large, roomy buildings, the old workshops, etc., with good floors instead of the cattle stalls and the bare ground. Captain Estabrook conducted us over the grounds and showed us the rhinoceros in all of its different shapes, and Colonel Wyatt did all the honors in his characteristic manner. Each and every one of the men seemed glad to see us. We did have a satchel crammed full of little or nothings, which we carried, and we shook hands with almost everybody and distributed the contents of the aforesaid satchel to different ones. One kind father sends a package of delicacies to his boys. A loving mother sends a change of linen for Sunday. A friend sends a letter, a newspaper, etc., to gladden their hearts by making them know that their comforts are not forgotten by those left at home. The volunteers have a great deal of hard drilling to go through. It is unnecessary for us to give a detailed account of their various duties, as will all be found in our correspondence letter on the first page. The men would be glad to see any of their friends from this county, and we would here remark that if there are any who are going to visit them, you can make many a one feel glad and thus be well paid for your trouble by seeing such of their friends here as you can conveniently, and taking along a letter, a word, a clean pair of socks, or 1,000 other little things, which would not at all discommode you. And if after this trouble is over and the soldiers are back again, if you should have any aspirations for the important trust of pound keeper, or feel that you are called to do state some service in her industrial institution at Joliet, we will pledge our word, which is never disputed, that they will vote for you every time. The humor part of that makes me think it's Henry's too, because he used a lot of humor in his letters. So that's where we're starting with this, and we'll be working these into the other videos as well. It'll be a mixture, and we won't stick with one type of video for a long period of time. We'll have the others worked in as well. And we have plans for some other types of videos when the weather turns better. So that's it for today. Hope you come back next time. We'll see you then.